You have a younger officer who has less life experience, has
Hmm.
less of a developed why and a purpose for being there, in doing the job. And they got into it because it looked cool. They wanted to wear their uniform, um, and it maybe came from less of my dad was a cop, my grandfather was a cop. His dad, my uncles were cops. I know about this job. I know the good stuff. I know the bad stuff. And despite all of the things, this is what I was born to do versus somebody, or this is what I'm committed to doing. I get it. And obviously there's learning experiences along the way versus this is nobody's ever been a cop in my family before. Like I'm here to kind of find out what this is all about. This is more of a discovery process for that younger officer, maybe than it is for the more senior officer who came in with a little bit more development, coming in. And again, that's not to disparage a younger generation. I just think that's what they're faced with. So, having said that, those older officers, when I say older, I just mean more veteran, having to deal with a cop like that, right? In a situation like on the street multiple times over and over and over again, and having to walk them through these processes, I wonder how that impacts them.
Yeah, it's just burnout. It's just a lot of work, right? I'll curb the first part, at least my perception of it. I don't think that most people coming in have a lack of purpose. I think a lot of people saw, in my experience in my region, a lot of people saw what was going on in 2020, 2021, and they're like, no, f that. I'm going to do something, right? Like maybe I know a handful of people that they put it on pause, maybe their career progression coming in. They had intended to be a cop. Then family's like, "What are you thinking?" And they hit the
Right.
pause button. But then they push through. Or you have a lot of people these days that are like they're in social work or they're teachers or they're in corporate and they're like, "No, this isn't the thing." And they see the need, right? So that goes back to that purpose. So they're coming in for a lot of good reasons. When I feel less assured of that is when I look at nationally when they're lowering or removing fitness standards. And our episode is going to drop next week on that with Chris Curris on Blue Grit.
Oh,
But
right.
yeah, the issues therein, right? Which is I don't want to go down that tangent too far, but yeah, going back to the experienced people that stuck around, they're burned out, right? They've ridden that wave, and I want to feel for us and them, but at the same time, what I want to circle around going on mindset and purpose is like, okay, cool. 2020 that sucked. 2021 that sucked. Okay, the last few years we were like understaffed and burned out, and yeah, that sucked too. And I was doing two jobs that sucked. Okay, cool. When are we going to stop talking about what sucked and let we have an opportunity to start building traction and not adopt the victim mentality? Because where does that leave us? And even when we talk about bosses, they don't get it, or the sergeants are on a different planet, and all these things. Like if and I'm not trying to sound fluffy, but like if we want to stay constructive, let's take a step back. And most of us come in with this really good intent, and most of us are pretty good dudes and gals, but we're not speaking the same language. We're not listening. We're not showing up. We're not actually asking the questions. Going back to the earlier thing, where I want cops everywhere just to recognize, hey, it's hard enough. Let's stop the infighting. And that's admin versus the line. That's union versus the sergeants and detectives versus patrol. Like we all have a hard enough job to do when we're fighting crime, criminals, like anything ranging from people making some terrible choices and some people that are actually vile and destructive, corrosive evil to our most vulnerable people. Like what is our core purpose? Is to protect the vulnerable. That's not infight, right? Let's step out of that because we have enough to deal with.
Yeah. So I think that is the struggle that people are having, right? I mean, at the end of the day, is they have that purpose. They feel like they're running into roadblocks, and they're seeing it like from their own people, and organizationally that's very tough. And I think from the institution in and of itself, it's going through these transition phases right now. And you nailed it, and that's where I wanted to get to on this is like, okay, 2020, 2021, that was ugly and it sucked. And as a citizen, I watched it happen right in front of me. I just saw the look of defeat on so many of my friends' faces, or the officers that I was dealing with just in my own neighborhood, on for things that we had to call, like, and they would
Hmm.
show up, and it was a different type of, when I say that, it was just a it was a different approach to things. There was less energy, or let's just say it was a different kind of energy. And so I saw all that. And so I can't imagine what it was like actually having to be the guy in the uniform, or the person in the uniform dealing with it. But you're right. At some point, you got to let it go, and you have to decide, why am I here, and or refresh your brain and your heart, I guess, and your soul, and why am I here, and what am I actually trying to get done? And I think most, I mean, I want to believe most officers, that they're doing their best to do that, but along the way, they developed a certain identity of who they are as a cop and what they're there to do and how they're supposed to do it. And they've invested so much into it. And they're reaching this point where they're kind of having an identity crisis. Like, did I make a wrong decision? Am I in the wrong place right now? And so we're watching them walk away from the profession, because they may have not been left with much else to think about. Partly that's part of self, and then part of that is like, what is the department doing to give them roads or pathways, the agency, the profession, pathways to find a different way to do the same kind or similar work. And so I wonder, again, going back to shifts, are you seeing any shifting happening, maybe even at your own agency, where that is starting to happen, or where we're seeing people maybe being encouraged to do things that they had never thought about doing, and being given opportunities to do them?
Yeah, for sure. That's the development piece. So one of my thought patterns, and like one of the things I'm working on at work in my duties, and then also in Blue Grid, is like, okay, development. Like that's the theme. What do we need? It's always development, and that's really the point of Blue Grit, right? It's not like I know better, but that's why I bring people like you, folks yourself, like experts, to come in, and we keep working on this thing. Like, how do we get better in every aspect of our lives? How do we show up the best for work, for purpose, for family, all the things, just life purpose? Like, how do you optimize yourself? And that comes with all these things, mindset, routine. And so how do we show up and show value to our people? Well, we invest in them. We give time. And so it is sitting down with my sergeants, and I'm very fortunate to have some badass sergeants, right? That we can sit down, we can talk over these issues and build alignment to say, hey, I don't know better than you. I know different than you. Like my job in the organization is a different seat. Your job is a different seat. I love your job and I see how influential it is. Let me know how I can help you. Here's an idea I have. Pick it apart. Let's craft this into a better idea. How does that look for us to develop our people? How can we mobilize that? And so maybe it becomes, yeah, let's start by sitting down with our people every month. And so that's something we're refining, pitching some questions around, add those, remove those, and making sure that it hones in on things like, how can we show up for you? Like, what do you need from me? Right? These are the things that the old school people would probably roll their eyes at. Like, oh,
Yep.
I'm gonna ask how to show up as a leader. Like, excuse me, but that's like, yeah, you don't need to ask how to be a boss. Just be a boss. Just tell people what to do. Right? Like, that's being a manager, whatever. But to be a leader, really the crux of ideal leadership, and I'm trying to figure out. That's like my quest, right? Continue refining that in a way that I can for me, because I'm a different person than this person or this commander. But leadership is having people follow you because they want to, not because they have to. And so if you meet them halfway, say, hey, what can I be doing differently? How do you prefer your feedback? How are these conversations going? Are you annoyed? Right? Like, at least if nothing else, people see you're trying, and think about that for yourself. Like, think about the good, bad, middle bosses, apathetic, engaged. You're like, I think most of us would agree that the ones that were trying, you'd give more grace and you'd be more willing to do something for them, right? So really, that's the crux of it. It's like just intention, attention, all these things, and I don't think there's a secret sauce. I think you just got to start rolling with it and be open to critique and keep building it.